I'm Linda, 28 years old, and I thought I was building a secure future when I invested my life savings into what I believed would be my home. Right now, I'm sitting in my car outside my childhood house, staring at an engagement invitation that's about to change everything I thought I knew about family. The elegant script announcing my brother's engagement party seems innocent enough, but what happened at that celebration would shatter every assumption I had about love, loyalty, and financial trust within my own family. I had no idea that my $30,000 investment, my careful planning, and my genuine desire to help would be turned against me in the most devastating way possible. Before I tell you how my own father looked me in the eye and destroyed my future in front of dozens of guests, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because this story about family betrayal and financial manipulation will shock you to your core. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Growing up as the responsible older sister in our middle-class family in Ohio taught me early that hard work and reliability were the keys to success. My father, Harold, worked long hours as a factory supervisor, while my mother, Beverly, balanced her part-time nursing job with raising two children who couldn't have been more different. From the time we were small, it was obvious that my brother Jerry, 3 years younger than me, held a special place in our parents' hearts that I could never quite reach, no matter how hard I tried. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Jerry wanted new baseball equipment for Little League, Harold would drive him to the sporting goods store that same weekend and buy whatever caught his eye. When I wanted art supplies for a school project or new books for pleasure reading, I was told that money didn't grow on trees, and I should save up my allowance or find a part-time job. By the time I turned 16, I was working weekends at a local grocery store, while Jerry spent his Saturdays playing video games or hanging out with friends never expected to contribute financially to his own wants or needs. Academically, the contrast was even more stark. I maintained honor roll throughout high school, participated in student government, and earned a partial scholarship to the state university. Jerry struggled to maintain a C average, skipped classes regularly, and showed little interest in planning for his future. Yet somehow, every parent-teacher conference ended with Harold and Beverly making excuses for Jerry, while expressing confidence that he would eventually find his way. My achievements were acknowledged with a brief, "That's nice, honey," before the conversation inevitably returned to concerns about Jerry's potential and how the family could better support his development. This dynamic continued through my college years. I worked multiple part-time jobs, applied for every grant and scholarship available, and graduated with minimal student loan debt thanks to my own efforts. Jerry enrolled in community college but dropped out after one semester, claiming he needed time to figure out what he really wanted to do with his life. Harold and Beverly supported this decision completely, saying that not everyone was meant for traditional education and that Jerry would find his calling when the time was right. After graduation, I landed my first real job as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized company in Columbus. The salary wasn't enormous, but it represented financial independence and the beginning of my adult life. I found a small apartment, bought used furniture, and started building my savings account with the methodical determination that had carried me through school. Meanwhile, Jerry continued living at home, working sporadically at various jobs that never seemed to last more than a few months. 2 years into my career, when I had finally accumulated a respectable emergency fund and was starting to think about bigger financial goals, Harold approached me with what he described as an incredible investment opportunity. He had been looking at a small apartment building in a decent neighborhood, 4 units that could provide steady rental income, while also solving the problem of housing for family members. The building was reasonably priced, but Harold was short on the down payment needed to secure the mortgage. He painted a picture that seemed almost too good to be true. The family would own rental property that could provide passive income for years to come. I would have a beautiful place to live rent-free, which would allow me to save even more money for my future. The investment would benefit everyone, while giving me a chance to be part of something bigger than just my own individual financial planning. Harold's enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself imagining family dinners in my own space, hosting holidays, and building the kind of stability I had always craved. The numbers Harold presented seemed reasonable. He needed $30,000 to complete the down payment, and while that represented nearly everything I had saved, plus my small inheritance from my grandmother's estate, Harold assured me this was a smart financial decision that would pay dividends for years to come. He spoke about how proud he was of my financial responsibility and how much he trusted me to be part of this venture. For someone who had spent her entire life trying to earn that level of recognition and respect from her father, his words felt like the validation I had always sought. Making the decision to invest required me to liquidate my savings account cash in a small CD that was earning modest interest and even take out a personal loan to reach the full $30,000 amount. It felt scary to give up my financial safety net, but Harold's confidence and the promise of rent-free living made it seem like a calculated risk rather than a dangerous gamble. I felt proud to be helping my family while also securing my own future housing situation. Moving into the corner unit of the apartment building felt like finally becoming a real adult. The two-bedroom space had large windows that filled the rooms with natural light, a small balcony perfect for morning coffee, and enough room for me to create the cozy, welcoming home I had always dreamed of having. For the first time in my life, I had complete control over my living space and the freedom to make it reflect my own personality and preferences. I threw myself into decorating with the same methodical approach I brought to everything else in my life. I researched paint colors for weeks before settling on a warm gray for the living room and a soft blue for the bedroom. I saved up for months to buy a comfortable sofa and matching chair, choosing pieces that would last for years rather than cheap furniture that would need replacing. Every purchase was carefully considered, from the kitchen table where I imagined hosting family dinners to the bookcases where I displayed my growing collection of novels and professional development books. The improvements I made went beyond simple decorating. The kitchen appliances were outdated when I moved in, so I gradually replaced them with energy-efficient models that would save money on utilities while making cooking more enjoyable. The bathroom needed updating, so I installed a new vanity and modern fixtures that transformed the space from functional to beautiful. I even replaced light fixtures throughout the apartment, choosing styles that created the warm, inviting atmosphere I wanted to come home to every evening. Creating this space felt like more than just setting up a place to live. It represented my independence, my good judgment, and my ability to create stability in my own life. I loved having friends over for dinner parties, showing off the kitchen where I had learned to cook more elaborate meals. I enjoyed the quiet Sunday mornings when I could sit on my balcony with coffee and a book, feeling grateful for the peaceful sanctuary I had created. When people complimented my decorating choices or commented on how welcoming my home felt, I experienced a pride that went deeper than simple satisfaction with my aesthetic decisions. The financial investment felt worthwhile every time I paid what would have been rent into my own savings account instead. Harold had been right about the economic benefits of the arrangement. I was able to rebuild my emergency fund more quickly than I had expected, and I even started contributing to a retirement account for the first time. The sense of financial security, combined with the emotional satisfaction of loving where I lived, made the $30,000 investment feel like the smartest decision I had ever made. Harold asked me to take on the role of on-site property manager since I lived in the building and had shown such good judgment with money and responsibility. I embraced this role enthusiastically, seeing it as another way to contribute to our family investment while gaining valuable experience in property management. I collected rent from the other 3 tenants, coordinated maintenance requests, and handled small repairs myself when possible to save money on contractor costs. The tenant relationships I built became one of the most rewarding aspects of living in the building. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, a retired teacher in her 70s, lived in the unit below mine and often brought me homemade cookies while sharing stories about her decades in the classroom. James Wilson, a graduate student in his mid-20s, rented the smallest unit and frequently asked for my advice about career planning and financial management. The third tenant, Paula Martinez, was a single mother who worked as a nurse and appreciated having a responsive, understanding landlord who prioritized making the building a safe, comfortable place for families. I kept meticulous records of all building related income and expenses, creating spreadsheets that tracked everything from utility costs to maintenance expenditures. When Harold needed receipts for tax purposes or wanted updates on the building's financial performance, I had every detail organized and readily available. I took pride in this level of organization and professionalism, seeing it as evidence that I was capable of handling significant responsibilities and contributing meaningfully to our family's financial success. Sometimes I had to cover unexpected expenses with my own money when Harold was traveling for work or temporarily short on cash. A broken water heater, emergency electrical repairs, or professional cleaning between tenants could cost several $100s that needed to be paid immediately. I never hesitated to handle these situations, keeping careful records of my expenditures and trusting that Harold would reimburse me promptly. The building was our shared investment, and I understood that maintaining its condition and keeping tenants happy was essential to our long-term success. The first signs of trouble began when Jerry started dating Sandra, a 23-year-old woman from one of the wealthiest families in our county. Sandra had grown up with private school education, family vacations to Europe, and the kind of casual luxury that comes from never having to think about money. She drove a new BMW that her parents had given her for graduation, carried designer handbags that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and had expensive tastes in restaurants, entertainment, and fashion that she clearly expected Jerry to match. Jerry, who had never held a steady job for more than 6 months and had no savings or credit history to speak of, suddenly found himself trying to keep up with a lifestyle that was completely beyond his means. He started asking Harold for money more frequently, claiming he needed to take Sandra to nice restaurants, buy her thoughtful gifts, and generally present himself as a successful young man worthy of her attention. Harold, who had always been generous with Jerry, but had never before provided such large amounts of cash, began giving him hundreds of dollars at a time without asking many questions about how the money was being spent. The change in Jerry's lifestyle was dramatic and immediate. He traded his beat-up Honda for a lease on a newer car that he clearly couldn't afford without Harold's help. He started wearing expensive clothes and cologne, taking Sandra to concerts and sporting events that required premium tickets, and talking about weekend trips to cities like Chicago and Nashville. Sandra seemed to accept these gestures as her due, never showing curiosity about how Jerry was suddenly able to afford such extravagances or expressing concern about the financial sustainability of their relationship. Harold's attitude toward Jerry's transformation was not just accepting but actively encouraging. He spoke proudly about Jerry finally stepping up and becoming the kind of man who could provide for a good woman. He made comments about how Sandra was exactly the kind of intelligent, well-bred girl he had always hoped Jerry would find, and how their relationship was evidence that Jerry was finally maturing into the successful adult Harold had always known he could become. The pride in Harold's voice when he talked about Jerry's new relationship was unmistakable and more enthusiastic than I could ever remember him being about any of my own achievements. Meanwhile, I started noticing that Harold seemed increasingly stressed about money. He mentioned that the apartment building's maintenance costs were higher than he had originally projected, particularly after we had to replace the aging furnace system and repair significant plumbing issues that affected 2 of the units. One of our long-term tenants moved out unexpectedly, leaving us with a vacant unit for several months while we made necessary improvements and searched for a reliable replacement. The lost rental income, combined with the costs of cleaning, painting, and minor renovations, created a financial strain that Harold hadn't anticipated when we first purchased the building. During this period, Harold began asking me to cover more of the building's expenses temporarily, assuring me that he would reimburse me as soon as his cash flow situation improved. I understood that rental property ownership involved unpredictable costs and periods of vacancy, so I didn't hesitate to help bridge these temporary financial gaps. I paid for professional carpet cleaning, covered the cost of advertising for new tenants, and handled several $100s in utility deposits and connection fees when services needed to be transferred between tenants. The combination of Harold's increased spending on Jerry's lifestyle and the building's higher-than-expected expenses created a situation where my reimbursement requests were increasingly delayed or only partially fulfilled. When I asked about money Harold owed me for building expenses, he would apologize for the delay and promise to get me a check within a week or two. Those promises were rarely kept on schedule, and when payments did arrive, they often covered only a portion of what I had actually spent. Harold's explanations for these delays always sounded reasonable, involving temporary cash flow issues or unexpected personal expenses, but the pattern was becoming difficult to ignore. Jerry's relationship with Sandra progressed quickly from casual dating to serious commitment, and Harold's investment in their future together became increasingly obvious and expensive. When Jerry decided to propose after just 8 months of dating, Harold not only approved of the decision, but financed an elaborate proposal that included a diamond ring that must have cost several months of Jerry's theoretical salary, a romantic dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city, and a weekend getaway to a luxury resort where Jerry planned to pop the question. The engagement announcement was followed immediately by plans for an engagement party that Harold insisted on hosting and financing. Sandra had specific ideas about how the celebration should look, involving professional catering, expensive flowers, and decorations that would create the kind of elegant atmosphere she was accustomed to from her own family's social events. Harold embraced these plans enthusiastically, seeing the party as an opportunity to demonstrate our family's success and social standing to Sandra's wealthy relatives and friends. I was expected to help organize and partly finance the engagement party decorations, while simultaneously dealing with my own growing concerns about the building's finances and Harold's delayed reimbursements. The irony of being asked to contribute to Jerry's celebration while struggling to get paid back for building expenses was not lost on me, but I couldn't figure out how to address the situation without seeming petty or unsupportive of Jerry's happiness. During the party planning process, I overheard Sandra complaining to her friends about the impossibility of living with in-laws after marriage, and her determination to have her own space where she and Jerry could start their life together properly. Around this time, I began noticing that Harold and Jerry were having private conversations that would stop abruptly whenever I entered the room. They would be deep in discussion at the kitchen table or on the back porch, but as soon as they saw me approaching, their conversation would shift to neutral topics like sports or weather. Beverly also became evasive when I asked direct questions about the building's finances, or when Harold might be able to catch up on his reimbursements to me. Her responses were vague and deflective, suggesting that I should be patient and understanding about temporary financial pressures affecting the whole family. My growing unease led me to do some investigating that I probably should have done much earlier in the process. Kenneth, my boyfriend of 2 years, had been expressing concern about my financial arrangement with Harold for months, particularly the fact that I had never received any formal documentation proving my ownership stake in the building. He encouraged me to visit the county courthouse and examine the official property records to confirm that my investment had been properly documented and legally protected. What I discovered at the courthouse was devastating and completely unexpected. The deed to the apartment building listed Harold as the sole owner, with no mention of my $30,000 investment or any indication that I held an ownership stake in the property. According to the official records, I had no legal claim to the building, despite having contributed the majority of the down payment and thousands of additional dollars for improvements and maintenance over the past 2 years. When I confronted Harold about these findings, trying to remain calm and give him an opportunity to explain what I hoped was simply an administrative oversight, his reaction was immediate and defensive. He became angry that I had been checking up on him and accused me of being suspicious and greedy rather than trusting and supportive like a daughter should be. He claimed that my money had been a family contribution rather than an investment, and that I had already been repaid through 2 years of rent-free living. Beverly supported Harold's position completely, making me feel guilty for questioning family arrangements and suggesting that my concerns were evidence of paranoia and ingratitude rather than legitimate financial worries. The engagement party was scheduled to be held at the apartment building, which Harold described as a perfect way to show off our family's success and provide an elegant setting for celebrating Jerry and Sandra's future together. Despite my growing concerns about the financial arrangements and legal ownership of the building, I couldn't bring myself to refuse to help with the celebration. I arrived early on the day of the party to set up decorations, arrange the catered food, and transform the building's common areas into a festive space worthy of Sandra's high standards and her family's expectations. The guest list included Sandra's wealthy parents and siblings, neighborhood friends who had known our family for years, extended relatives from both sides, and several of Jerry's coworkers and drinking buddies. I found myself working as the unofficial hostess, making sure guests had drinks, directing them to the bathroom facilities, and answering questions about the building and our family's investment in real estate. The irony of presenting myself as knowledgeable about property ownership while having no legal claim to the building created an internal tension that made the entire evening feel surreal and emotionally exhausting. As the party progressed through dinner and initial toasts, I kept expecting some acknowledgement of my role in making the building purchase possible, or recognition of the work I had put into maintaining and improving the property over the past 2 years. Sandra's father made comments about the building's attractive condition and prime location, noting that Jerry was fortunate to have such a solid foundation for starting his married life. Several guests complimented the decorations and atmosphere, assuming that Jerry and Sandra had been responsible for creating such a welcoming space for their celebration. After dinner, Harold called for everyone's attention and began making a speech about Jerry's growth into manhood and his excitement about welcoming Sandra into our family. He praised Sandra as an intelligent, beautiful woman who would be a perfect partner for Jerry, and he spoke about the importance of young couples having strong family support as they began building their future together. The speech felt warm and heartfelt, and I found myself getting emotional despite my concerns, hoping that Harold's next words would include some recognition of my contributions to the family's success. Instead, Harold dramatically produced an official-looking document from his jacket pocket and announced that he had a special wedding gift for Jerry and Sandra. The room fell silent as Harold explained that he was giving them complete ownership of the apartment building as a wedding present, ensuring that they would have both a place to live and a source of rental income to support their new family. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause as Harold handed the deed to Jerry, who accepted it with tears in his eyes, while Sandra squealed with delight and immediately began discussing renovation plans with her mother. I stood frozen in the middle of the celebration, watching my $30,000 investment and 2 years of property management work being given away as if they had never existed. Guests surrounded Jerry and Sandra to congratulate them on their incredible good fortune and Harold's extraordinary generosity, while I struggled to process what had just happened and figure out how to respond without creating a scene that would ruin the party and embarrass everyone involved. The congratulations continued for several minutes, as guests praised Harold for his fatherly wisdom and generosity, Sandra for landing such a wonderful family, and Jerry for his good fortune in having parents who could provide such substantial support for his future. Sandra's parents expressed amazement at Harold's generosity and made comments about how rare it was to find such dedicated family support in today's world. Through it all, I remained invisible, my contributions unmentioned and unacknowledged. Then Harold turned to me in front of the entire crowd and delivered the final blow. He announced that since Jerry now owned the building, I would need to move out within 30 days to give the newlyweds privacy and space to start their married life properly. He spoke as if this was a perfectly reasonable request, noting that I had enjoyed rent-free living for 2 years and should be grateful for the opportunity to have saved so much money during that time. The casual, matter-of-fact way he delivered this announcement made it clear that he expected no argument or resistance from me. I excused myself to the bathroom, claiming I needed a moment to freshen up, but really needing space to collect my thoughts and figure out how to handle the most devastating betrayal I had ever experienced. Standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom I had renovated with my own money, I realized that I had no legal recourse to recover my investment. But I also refused to be completely defeated by Harold's manipulation and Jerry's willingness to accept stolen generosity as his due. Kenneth arrived at the party late due to work obligations, and he immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong despite the festive atmosphere and ongoing celebrations. I managed to briefly explain what had happened, and while he was outraged on my behalf, he supported my decision to handle the situation strategically rather than creating an immediate confrontation that would accomplish nothing except public embarrassment for everyone involved. Over the next several days, I quietly began documenting everything I could prove about my financial contributions to the building and the improvements I had made using my own money. I photographed receipts for every appliance, piece of furniture, and renovation I had paid for over the past 2 years. I gathered bank statements showing the $30,000 investment loan documents I had signed to contribute to the down payment, and records of every building-related expense I had covered when Harold was unable to reimburse me promptly. I also created a detailed inventory of everything in the apartment that legitimately belonged to me, from the furniture I had purchased to the kitchen appliances I had installed to the light fixtures I had chosen and paid for during my renovation efforts. The list was longer than I had initially realized, encompassing not just obvious personal belongings, but also thousands of dollars worth of improvements that had increased the building's value and appeal to tenants. I contacted a lawyer to understand what legal options might be available to me, even though I suspected the news would not be encouraging. As I had feared, the attorney confirmed that without proper documentation of my investment and ownership stake, recovering my $30,000 through legal action would be extremely difficult and expensive. The lawyer suggested that my best option was to focus on protecting and recovering the assets I could prove belonged to me, while accepting that the larger financial loss might be impossible to recoup. Kenneth offered both financial and emotional support during this transition period, understanding that I was not just losing money, but also confronting the reality that my own family had deliberately deceived and betrayed me for Jerry's benefit. He helped me research apartments and moving companies, and he assured me that I could stay with him temporarily if needed while I found a new place to live and rebuilt my financial stability. I decided to approach my exit from the building methodically and comprehensively. If Harold and Jerry wanted to treat my contributions as if they had never existed, then I would remove every trace of my investment and leave them with exactly what they had contributed to the building's condition and value. I arranged for a moving truck and storage unit planning to remove everything I could legally claim, while documenting the process carefully in case Harold tried to accuse me of theft or property damage. The moving process took several days and required multiple trips to transport everything from major appliances to small decorative items that I had purchased over 2 years of making the apartment my home. I removed the refrigerator, washing machine, dryer, and dishwasher that I had bought to replace the building's original outdated appliances. I took the bathroom vanity I had installed, the light fixtures I had chosen, and even the ceiling fans that had replaced the basic fixtures that came with the apartment originally. Moving day arrived with the efficiency of a military operation, as I had planned every detail to ensure I could remove my belongings quickly and thoroughly before Jerry and Sandra realized the full extent of what they were losing. Kenneth had arranged to take time off work to help coordinate the logistics, and we had hired a moving company that specialized in rapid relocations for people leaving difficult family or domestic situations. Jerry and Sandra arrived at the building mid-morning to find me directing movers who were loading a truck with what they had apparently assumed were their new possessions. Jerry immediately became confrontational, demanding to know what I thought I was doing and accusing me of stealing property that now belonged to him. Sandra stood behind him, looking increasingly horrified as she watched her dream apartment being systematically stripped of everything that had made it attractive and comfortable. I remained calm and methodical in my responses, explaining that every item being removed belonged to me, and showing receipts and documentation when Jerry challenged my claims. The kitchen appliances had been purchased by me to replace the outdated equipment that came with the building. The furniture, decorations, and electronics were items I had bought with my own money to create a comfortable living space. Even small items like throw pillows, artwork, and kitchen utensils were things I had accumulated over 2 years of treating the apartment as my permanent home. Sandra's distress escalated as she realized that her vision of moving into a beautifully appointed apartment was disappearing before her eyes. She had been planning to host dinner parties and social gatherings in what she thought was a fully furnished, elegantly decorated space. Instead, she was looking at empty rooms with basic fixtures, outdated appliances, and none of the comfort or style she had expected to inherit, along with the building ownership. Harold arrived at the building in response to frantic phone calls from Jerry, and his initial reaction was fury at what he perceived as my vindictive destruction of family property. He demanded that I return everything to the apartment immediately, threatening legal action if I continued removing items that he claimed belonged to the building. I responded by presenting him with a detailed accounting of every building-related expense I had covered during the past 2 years, totaling several $1,000s that he had never reimbursed despite repeated promises to do so. The confrontation continued for over an hour as Harold alternated between threats, guilt trips, and attempts to negotiate some kind of compromise that would allow Jerry and Sandra to keep the most valuable items while giving me token compensation for my losses. I refused every suggestion, explaining that I was taking only what legally belonged to me and that Harold was welcome to pursue legal action if he believed I was acting improperly. Beverly arrived toward the end of the moving process and attempted to mediate the situation, but her efforts were undermined by her obvious bias toward Harold and Jerry's position. She suggested that I was being unreasonable and vindictive, prioritizing money over family relationships and causing unnecessary drama during what should have been a happy time for Jerry and Sandra. Her inability to acknowledge the injustice of my situation or recognize Harold's betrayal made it clear that the family dynamics I had experienced throughout my childhood were unchanged and would never improve. Some of our extended family members who had attended the engagement party began asking questions about what was happening, having heard rumors about the confrontation from neighbors who had witnessed the moving truck and heated discussions. Several relatives expressed private concern that I had been treated unfairly, but none were willing to publicly challenge Harold's authority or support my position in any meaningful way. The final phase of my departure involved terminating all the services and utilities that I had been paying for in my own name. I canceled the internet and cable service, transferred the electric and gas bills to Harold's responsibility, and notified the water company that I would no longer be responsible for the building's water bill. I also formally resigned from all property management responsibilities, providing Harold with contact information for the current tenants and a summary of pending maintenance issues that would need his attention. As the moving truck pulled away from the building for the final time, I felt a mixture of grief and relief that surprised me with its intensity. I was devastated by the financial loss and the betrayal by people I had trusted completely, but I was also liberated from a situation that had been built on deception and manipulation from the very beginning. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely independent of my family's financial influence and free to make decisions based solely on my own best interests. The aftermath of my departure created immediate practical problems for Jerry and Sandra that Harold had apparently not anticipated when he planned his generous wedding gift. Without my careful management and financial oversight, the building's operations became chaotic and expensive in ways that quickly strained Harold's budget and tested Jerry's non-existent property management skills. The first crisis occurred within a week when Mrs. Thompson, the retired teacher who lived below my former apartment, called about a plumbing leak that was causing water damage to her ceiling and personal belongings. Jerry had no idea how to handle maintenance emergencies, and Harold was at work when the call came in. By the time they arranged for a plumber to assess the situation, the water damage had spread significantly and required professional remediation that cost nearly $2,000. Sandra's renovation dreams, which had seemed so exciting during the engagement party, proved to be far more expensive than Harold could afford on his factory supervisor salary. The professional designers she consulted provided estimates for kitchen and bathroom updates that would cost $15,000 to $20,000 per unit, amounts that would have required Harold to take out a second mortgage or personal loan to finance. The reality of renovation costs, combined with the ongoing expenses of building maintenance and the lost rental income from keeping units vacant during construction, made Sandra's plans impossible to implement. Jerry's attempt to manage tenant relations was a disaster that resulted in 2 of the 3 remaining tenants giving notice within a month of my departure. James Wilson, the graduate student, was frustrated by Jerry's unprofessional communication style and his inability to respond promptly to maintenance requests. Paula Martinez, the single mother who worked as a nurse, felt uncomfortable with Jerry's casual attitude toward privacy and his tendency to enter apartments without proper notice for minor issues that could have been handled with phone calls. The building's financial performance deteriorated rapidly as Harold struggled to cover mortgage payments, utilities, and maintenance costs without the rental income from vacant units or the careful financial management I had provided. Harold found himself spending significantly more time dealing with building-related problems, often having to leave work early or use vacation days to handle emergencies that I had previously managed efficiently during my off hours. Meanwhile, I was adapting to my new living situation with a resilience that surprised both Kenneth and myself. I found a small but well-maintained apartment in a different neighborhood close enough to my job that I could walk to work on nice days, but far enough from my family's area that I was unlikely to encounter them accidentally. The apartment was significantly smaller than the space I had created in the building, but it was entirely mine and represented a fresh start based on honest financial arrangements. My career benefited from the skills I had developed during my time managing the building and dealing with the crisis of my family's betrayal. The experience of handling tenant relations, coordinating maintenance, and managing property finances had given me practical knowledge that proved valuable in my marketing role, particularly when working with clients in real estate and property development. Within 6 months of leaving the building, I received a promotion that included a significant salary increase and additional responsibilities that I found both challenging and rewarding. Kenneth's support during this transition period deepened our relationship in ways that helped me understand what genuine partnership and mutual respect actually looked like. Unlike my family's conditional support that was always tied to my willingness to accommodate other people's needs and desires, Kenneth's care for my well-being was consistent and selfless. He celebrated my professional successes, supported my financial recovery efforts, and never made me feel guilty for prioritizing my own interests over family obligations. I also began developing new friendships and social connections that were based on mutual interests and genuine compatibility rather than family obligation or convenience. The coworkers who became close friends appreciated my reliability and professional competence without expecting me to provide financial support or accept unfair treatment. The neighbors in my new building related to me as an equal adult, rather than someone whose role was to facilitate other people's comfort and success. The emotional healing process was more complex and gradual than the practical adjustments to my new living situation. I spent months working through feelings of anger, betrayal, and grief that were complicated by genuine love for family members who had treated me so poorly. Understanding that Harold's favoritism toward Jerry was not a reflection of my worth or value as a person required challenging deeply ingrained beliefs about family loyalty and unconditional love that had shaped my identity since childhood. Eventually, I was able to recognize that the $30,000 I lost was essentially tuition for learning crucial lessons about financial self-protection, family dynamics, and the importance of legal documentation in any business arrangement. The money was gone forever, and the knowledge I gained about my own strength, resilience, and ability to create a successful, independent life was worth far more than the financial loss I had suffered. I also came to understand that Harold's treatment of me had enabled Jerry's irresponsibility and dependence in ways that were ultimately harmful to his long-term development and success. By always providing financial rescue and expecting nothing in return, Harold had prevented Jerry from learning essential life skills like budgeting, planning, and taking responsibility for his own decisions. The building ownership that Harold had given Jerry as a gift would likely become a burden rather than a blessing, as Jerry lacked the knowledge, skills, and work ethic necessary to manage rental property successfully. The most important lesson I learned was that family relationships should be based on mutual respect, fairness, and genuine concern for each person's well-being, rather than one-sided sacrifice and accommodation. Love that requires you to accept unfair treatment or financial exploitation is not really love at all, but rather manipulation disguised as family loyalty. Building a life based on my own merit, judgment, and efforts proved to be far more satisfying than depending on family approval or trying to earn love through financial generosity. My story ends not with revenge or dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet satisfaction of having protected my own interests while learning to value relationships that honor my contributions and respect my boundaries. I wish Jerry and Sandra well in their marriage, and hope that Harold eventually learns to treat all his children with equal respect and fairness. But I no longer make my happiness dependent on their choices or approval. Sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the clarity that comes from seeing people's true character when their self-interest is at stake. Harold's willingness to sacrifice my financial security for Jerry's convenience taught me to trust my own judgment about what constitutes fair treatment and to insist on legal protection for any significant financial commitments. That knowledge has served me well in subsequent relationships and business dealings, helping me build a life based on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine partnership. If you have experienced similar family betrayal or financial manipulation, I hope my story helps you understand that protecting your own interests is not selfish but necessary for building healthy relationships with people who truly value your well-being. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own financial security? How did you handle a situation where someone you trusted took advantage of your generosity? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe for more content about overcoming family drama and financial challenges, and share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of protecting yourself in family business arrangements. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you make decisions that prioritize your own well-being and long-term happiness. Remember that you deserve relationships built on fairness and mutual respect, and never let anyone convince you that family love requires accepting unfair treatment or financial exploitation.